I was humiliated at the family table, and they had no idea who I really was. I've always believed that time reveals everything, the depth of love, the strength of bonds, and, most painfully, the cracks in what once seemed solid. I learned this truth over dinner one rainy Saturday evening, when my husband and I visited his parents' home for what was supposed to be a casual family gathering. At least, that's what I had been led to believe. We pulled up to their house just past 6, the sky already dim and heavy with clouds. As we walked up to the door, I remember looking at my husband, David, and saying, "Let's just get through this without any drama." He squeezed my hand and gave me a reassuring smile, the one that always made me feel like I could endure anything. I'd met his parents countless times over the years. We'd been married for 8. I wasn't the new girlfriend or some stranger tagging along for the first time. I was supposed to be family. I'd been through holidays, funerals, birthdays. I knew where they kept the tea and how his mom liked her linens folded. And yet, that night, something in the air felt off. His mother greeted us at the door with her usual semi-formal embrace. His father offered a stiff nod. Nothing unusual. What was unusual, though, was the seating arrangement. The dining room had been set up with 2 tables. One large, elegantly decorated one in the main space, white linen, candles, the fine plates. The other, a smaller round table off to the side, near the kitchen. Barely dressed, no wine glasses, no centerpieces. As people began filtering in, cousins, siblings, their partners, I watched where they were being directed. To the main table. Everyone except me. "Sweetheart," his mother said, gesturing casually toward the smaller table, "we've set up a space for you over there. I hope that's all right." At first, I thought she was joking. I blinked. Smiled politely. "Oh? Is there not enough room at the big table?" Her lips barely moved. "It's more of a tradition thing. Family sits together, blood family. You understand." I turned toward David, expecting him to say something, to laugh, to pull out a chair next to his at the main table. But he just stood there, stunned, unsure, awkward. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Even the clink of glasses and small talk seemed to pause. "Are you serious?" I asked, still trying to keep my voice low. His mother gave a nod, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "I'm David's wife," I said, carefully. "I've been part of this family for years." His father cleared his throat. "We're just trying to keep things orderly. It's how we've always done it. Nothing personal." But it was personal. It was a choice, a clear line drawn in porcelain and silverware. A message wrapped in napkin folds and seating plans. I wasn't one of them. Not truly. Not enough. I could feel my chest tighten, but I didn't let it show. I walked over to the side table slowly, like I had all the time in the world, and sat. Alone. I stared at the empty seat across from me and tried to ignore the laughter at the other table. I could hear them clinking glasses, sharing stories, passing plates, all while I sat like some forgotten guest at the children's table. David didn't move. He kept glancing at me, but didn't say a word to his parents. That hurt more than anything else. But I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I waited. Because I knew something they didn't. You see, just 2 months earlier, my company had acquired a mid-sized financial consulting firm. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I rarely discussed work with David's family. They never asked. But I knew, from HR reports and internal briefings, that both his parents were part of that firm. His father was a mid-level advisor, and his mother worked part-time in the compliance department. They were my employees now. Technically. And tonight, after what they'd done, I felt no obligation to keep that fact hidden. When dinner was over, and the others began milling into the living room for drinks and dessert, I stood. Walked up to them with quiet confidence. His mother was pouring coffee. She looked surprised when I approached. "I hope everything met your standards," she said, her tone polite, clipped. "It did," I said. Though I was surprised by the seating. "I suppose I misunderstood my role in this family." She raised an eyebrow. "It's nothing personal. Just tradition." I smiled. "Well, I'll be seeing both of you on Monday anyway, won't I?" They paused. Confused. At the quarterly team briefing. I'm leading it. She blinked. What do you mean? I leaned in slightly. You both work for a company that now reports directly to mine. You may not consider me family. But I am, for now, your employer. The silence was glorious. David's face paled. His father opened his mouth, then closed it. And his mother, she just stared, mug of coffee halfway to her lips, utterly stunned. I turned without another word, walked back to David, and said, "Let me know when you're ready to go." We drove home in silence. David didn't say a word, and I wasn't in the mood to fill the gaps. The only sound in the car was the quiet hum of tires over wet pavement and the faint tapping of raindrops against the windshield. He kept glancing at me, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. I stared straight ahead. My chest felt tight, my throat dry, but I wouldn't let myself cry. Not for this. Not for people who saw me as less than. Finally, halfway home, he broke the silence. "I didn't know they were going to do that," he said. "I swear." "I believe you," I said, voice even. "But you didn't stop it." He didn't respond. And that silence hurt more than any words could. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom and started changing. I pulled off the dress I'd chosen so carefully, the one I thought would make me feel part of their world. It landed in a crumpled heap on the floor. David stood in the doorway. "They're from a different generation," he tried. I gave him a look that stopped him cold. Don't excuse it." "I'm not excusing it," he said quickly, stepping forward. They've always had their ways. You know that. And you've always gone along with them," I snapped. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I didn't want to make a scene." I turned back to the mirror. "That's the difference between you and me. I've never been afraid of making a scene when someone disrespects me." He nodded, quietly. "I know. And I admire that. I didn't want to make it worse." "You made it worse by saying nothing." We didn't speak much after that. He slept on the couch that night, and I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, playing the night over and over in my head. Their faces. The casual cruelty of it. The way they dismissed me like I was a temporary inconvenience instead of a life partner. I woke early the next morning. By habit, I checked emails, scanned through weekend memos from the leadership team, and reviewed the list of Monday's internal briefing attendees. Sure enough, both Arthur and Elaine, my in-laws, were scheduled to attend the virtual all-hands meeting for the company we'd absorbed. I smiled to myself. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even petty. This was simply visibility. Letting the truth sit in the open air, where it belonged. When Monday came, I dressed with care. Sharp blazer, subtle jewelry, nothing flashy, but powerful. My assistant sent over the final slides for the quarterly review, and I added one last item at the end: "Welcome integration team, meet your executive leadership." I logged into the call 10 minutes early. My face appeared on screen, and within seconds, others began joining. Names flashed. Boxes filled. And then, there they were, Arthur B. and Elaine B., sitting in their respective home offices, unaware. When I began speaking, I could see it happen in real time. Arthur stiffened. Elaine's face drained of color. I could practically hear the way her breath caught in her throat. I ran the meeting as I always did, concise, calm, professional. Spoke about projections, culture shifts, performance expectations. And when I introduced the integration leadership team, I included myself. As the executive director for strategic operations, I'll be directly overseeing the transition team for the next 2 quarters. I looked straight into the camera when I said it. Not a threat. Not a performance. Just a statement of fact. The rest of the team clapped. Some typed compliments in the chat. I smiled, thanked everyone, and logged off. Later that afternoon, my assistant forwarded me a message, a calendar invite from Arthur requesting a one-on-one meeting. I accepted. When the call started, he looked nervous. Not the rigid, stern man I'd seen at countless dinners, but someone suddenly aware of a hierarchy he couldn't control. "Thank you for taking the time," he began. Of course, I said smoothly. How can I help? I didn't realize, he stammered. You didn't realize I was your superior? He shifted uncomfortably. No. I mean, yes. That, too. But more than that, I didn't realize how far you've come. What you've built. I raised an eyebrow. Because you never asked. He nodded slowly, his pride visibly cracking. I suppose I didn't. There was a beat of silence. I want to apologize for what happened at dinner, he said. It wasn't fair. No, it wasn't, I replied. But it was honest. You showed me exactly how you see me. And now I've shown you how I see myself. I understand, he said, eyes dropping. I don't need your apology, I added. I need your respect. And that starts with you seeing me for who I am, not just who I married. He nodded again, smaller this time. Yes. Of course. I ended the meeting shortly after. Elaine didn't reach out. I didn't expect her to. That night, David tried to talk to me again. I heard Dad spoke with you. He did. He said he apologized. He did. David hesitated. Is that enough? I turned to him. Not yet. But it's a start. He looked relieved. And for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not because his father had apologized, but because I hadn't let them reduce me. And I wouldn't. Ever again. The next week passed slowly, like time had thickened, and every second came with the weight of what had been said, and what hadn't. David and I drifted in a quiet rhythm at home. We still shared coffee in the mornings, exchanged small talk about errands and emails, but something had shifted. We were polite, careful. We avoided anything too deep, too vulnerable. Like walking over ice we weren't sure would hold. I wasn't angry anymore, not exactly. The anger had cooled into something heavier. Disappointment. A lingering awareness that no matter how much I'd tried, how much I'd given, I still wasn't enough in their eyes. Not their kind of enough. It's strange how clarity can come from insult. I'd spent years making myself smaller to fit into their version of acceptable. I used to bake cookies I didn't even enjoy just because his mother liked them. I used to nod through conversations about family traditions, biting my tongue every time I heard, "That's just the way we do things." But not anymore. I was done performing. At work, the team was energized. Our integration project was ahead of schedule. Morale was high. During a leadership workshop midweek, Arthur sat in the back of the room, mostly silent. He took notes, nodded when appropriate, avoided eye contact. There was no tension, at least not public. But I could feel him recalibrating every time I spoke. Reassessing me. That Friday, I received a handwritten card on my desk. No signature. Just 3 lines in neat, looping cursive. People show you who they are in quiet ways. I saw more than I said. Thank you for not flinching. There was no name, but I knew who it was from. Elaine. It surprised me. And, more than that, it made me pause. Not because it changed anything, not overnight, but because it suggested the beginning of something neither of us had allowed for before, reflection. I tucked the note into my drawer without a word. That weekend, David suggested we go away, just for a night. A break. A neutral place. We ended up in a small coastal town a few hours from the city, renting a quiet Airbnb with a view of the sea. It rained most of the time, soft and steady, and we walked along the beach with jackets zipped high and hands buried in our pockets. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a repair mission. It was more like a reset, 2 people trying to see each other again through the noise. I didn't realize how much you were holding back, he said one evening as we sat by the window, watching the waves. I didn't either, I said. Not until I stopped. He looked down at his coffee. Do you hate them? I shook my head. I don't hate them. I don't even think they hate me. I think they're just stuck in a world where family means something very specific. And I don't fit that mold. He nodded. They never expected you to be who you are. No, I said. And they never thought they'd have to answer to me. That's the part they weren't ready for. He exhaled slowly. Do you think things can ever be normal again? I turned to face him. Not the old normal. But maybe a new one. One where I don't have to pretend to be smaller than I am. He reached for my hand, hesitant. I let him take it. That night, something shifted between us again. Not like magic. Not like forgiveness. But like a door opening, one that had been locked for too long. We didn't talk about his parents after that. We talked about us. About what we wanted in 5 years. About what we feared. About what we'd ignored in each other. It was raw. It was real. And it was overdue. Back home, Monday brought another shift at work. Elaine requested a one-on-one meeting. No agenda. Just a short message, if you're open to it, I'd like to speak. I said yes. She appeared on screen in a navy blouse, hair pulled back. No makeup. No pleasantries. I want to be honest, she began. I didn't see you before. Not really. I said nothing. Let her talk. I saw a wife. A plus one. Someone nice, capable, but peripheral. And I let that define everything. I didn't think it was disrespect. I thought it was order. Tradition. But after last week, she paused. You were gracious. I wasn't. Her voice wavered slightly. I can't undo what happened. But I'd like to start again. On real terms. If you're willing. There was silence between us. Thick. Honest. I'm willing, I said, slowly. But it won't be on anyone's terms but mine. I understand. We ended the call with a quiet nod. No fanfare. No grand resolution. But something fragile and honest passed between us, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were both finally seeing each other clearly. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after confrontation, not the shouting kind, but the quiet kind. The kind where truth is finally out in the open and nobody can pretend not to see it anymore. After Elaine's message and our conversation, I didn't expect immediate change. I didn't even hope for it. But I did notice the small things. She began to participate more in meetings, her comments more thoughtful, less rehearsed. Arthur became more reserved, more cautious, as if still trying to calculate how to engage with me in this new dynamic. They weren't warm, not yet, but they were aware. That mattered more. At home, David and I began piecing things together. Not through big dramatic gestures or sweeping apologies, but through smaller decisions. We ate dinner at the table again. We talked without walking on eggshells. And when we disagreed, we didn't retreat, we leaned in. It was unfamiliar terrain, but we both wanted to understand each other in a way we hadn't before. One night, as we sat watching the news with our legs tangled on the couch, David turned to me and asked, "Do you ever feel like you were living 2 lives before?" I nodded. Yeah. One where I was leading teams, making decisions, shaping futures. And another where I was quietly trying to be acceptable to people who didn't really care to know me. He squeezed my hand. I'm sorry for not seeing that sooner. I'm not mad that you didn't see it, I said. I'm just glad you do now. He rested his head on my shoulder, and we stayed like that, not fixing anything, just existing honestly. Then came the annual company retreat. It was a big deal. Every year, our leadership teams met off-site for 2 days of planning, brainstorming, and bonding. Usually held at a resort a few hours from the city, it was both business and symbolic, a place where the people shaping the future of the company aligned their visions. Arthur and Elaine were both on the attendee list. I won't lie, I felt a little apprehensive. Not because I feared another slight or humiliation, but because I knew that the environment would be different. Less structured. More personal. There would be wine. Group dinners. Shared cabins. I wasn't sure how much had really changed between us, and this would be the test. The retreat started with a meet-and-greet dinner. Casual. Buffet style. I arrived early, took a seat at a round table near the center, and greeted people as they came in. Conversations hummed around me, laughter echoed off the wooden beams of the lodge. Elaine arrived with 2 other women from her department. She spotted me and, to my surprise, walked directly over. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked. I gestured to the chair. "Of course." She smiled politely. It wasn't warm, but it was genuine. We made small talk, the weather, the venue, the surprisingly good seafood. Then, after a pause, she said quietly, "Arthur wanted to sit elsewhere tonight. He's adjusting." I nodded. "That's fair." She looked at me. "This retreat, it's different from what we're used to. But in a good way. People here don't seem afraid to speak up." "That's the goal," I said. "No one should feel invisible." She glanced down at her plate, then back at me. "Thank you for making space for that." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the silence sit between us, not uncomfortable, but deliberate. "You made space, too," I said finally. "Even if it took a while." Later that evening, we had a team-building exercise, a storytelling session by the fire. Each person was asked to share a moment when they felt unseen or underestimated, and how they pushed through. When my turn came, I hesitated only briefly. "There was a time," I began, "when I was made to sit apart, not just physically, but symbolically. I was told, indirectly, that I wasn't family. That I didn't belong. And for a long time, I tried to earn that belonging through silence. Through humility. Through being small." People around the fire grew still. No one said a word. But then I realized, my worth wasn't determined by a seat at the table. It was in the way I built my own. In the people who pulled up chairs beside me without being asked. And in the way I stopped apologizing for being too much. When I finished, a few people clapped. Not loudly, but thoughtfully. Elaine didn't clap. But she met my eyes. And nodded. That was more than enough. The next day, Arthur approached me during a break between sessions. We stood outside, under a canopy of trees. The air smelled of pine and possibility. "I listened to your story last night," he said. I turned. "I saw you." He exhaled. "I wasn't ready to hear it before. I am now." I didn't smile. I didn't soften. But I said, "Good." He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead, he simply extended his hand. I took it. Firm. Brief. Uncomplicated. In that moment, I knew something had shifted, not everything, not all at once. But enough. Not because I demanded it. Not because I retaliated. But because I stood in the full height of who I was and refused to shrink. The retreat ended on a crisp Sunday morning. As people packed up their things and trickled out to their cars, there was a lightness in the air, the kind that follows honesty, after all the masks have fallen away. I stayed a little longer than most, walking the wooded paths behind the lodge. I didn't need to rush. I wanted to take it all in. David met me back home that evening. He hadn't come to the retreat, he said it felt like a space I needed for myself, and he was right. We sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, the sun setting behind the hills. "How was it?" he asked gently. "Real," I said. "Hard. But good." He looked at me thoughtfully, then said, "My mom sent me a message. She said she was proud of how you handled everything." I nodded slowly. She didn't need to say it. I saw it. "And my dad?" I looked out over the trees, remembering Arthur's handshake. Still processing. "But he sees me now." "That's a start." David was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You've changed." I turned to him. "So have you." We didn't need to say more. The foundation we were rebuilding was built on less talk and more truth. It was uncomfortable at times, but it was real. And that made all the difference. A few weeks later, we got an invitation, another family dinner. This time, it wasn't hosted by his parents, but by his younger sister, Claire. She'd always been warm, more open-minded. We decided to go, cautiously. The moment we walked in, I could feel the difference. There was one table. One. Claire hugged me tightly. You sit wherever you want, she whispered with a knowing smile. We're all family here. Arthur and Elaine were already seated. They both stood as we approached. Elaine offered a faint but sincere smile. Arthur gave a nod, more respectful than before. I took a seat beside David. The conversation was lighter than usual, but not fake. At one point, Arthur even asked me a question about work, real curiosity in his voice. Not performative. Just human. After dinner, Elaine came up to me in the kitchen while I was helping clear plates. I hope this one felt better, she said, quietly. It did, I replied. Thank you. She looked at me, a trace of something in her eyes, humility, maybe. Or regret. You know, she said, I used to think family was about blood and names. Now I think it's about respect. And consistency. I dried my hands with a towel and met her gaze. That's exactly what it is. She nodded once, then went to rejoin the others. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No tears. No sweeping apologies. Just a soft alignment, two people who had finally stepped into the same truth. In the weeks that followed, things continued to improve. Slowly. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Elaine sent me updates from work, asked for my perspective. Arthur joined a task force I led and contributed meaningfully. They didn't pretend nothing had happened, they just worked harder to be different. And David, he became my fiercest ally. Not just as a husband, but as someone who understood what it meant to stand beside me, not in front or behind. We found each other again, in a way we hadn't for years. One quiet evening, months later, I found that old dress, the one I wore the night of the first dinner. Crumpled in the back of the closet, untouched since that night. I picked it up, smoothed the fabric, and stared at it for a while. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the donation box. I didn't need it anymore. That dress was part of the version of me who believed she had to earn a seat at someone else's table. But I'd learned something far more important. I wasn't meant to sit quietly on the sidelines, waiting for permission. I was meant to lead, with grace, with strength, and with unshakable clarity about who I was. Because when people try to define your worth by where you sit, the most powerful thing you can do is build your own table, and invite them to see what real belonging looks like. And that's exactly what I did. Thank you all for watching the video, and see you soon.